Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Facebook and YouTube Live. And we always know when we go live, this can be a little challenging. So hopefully this will all go smoothly tonight. But we are so excited to be here for the live celebration of Nicole Freezer Rubens' stunning debut book of poems and photos that were written and taken during the lockdown phase of New York City during the pandemic. And the book is perfectly titled The Long Pause and the Short Breath. And we're also really looking forward to your comments tonight. So please feel free to put things into the chat box. And to get you started, I have a question for all of you. So just tell us, what city or location were you in during the pandemic? And while you're doing that, I'm going to bring in the poet and the photographer, Nicole. So hi, Nicole. I'm so excited. Are you excited?
I'm very, very excited and
Oh,
very
great. And
grateful that
you
everybody
should,
has
you,
tuned in.
yeah, you absolutely should be excited. And honestly, it was such an honor for me to publish your book, which takes us inside the lockdown bubble in New York City and through your poetry and your really stunning and often shocking photography too, when you start to read the juxtaposition of see the photos and then you read what was going on with the poetry. But you really captured the tidal wave of emotions that we all felt during that time. You know, the endless sirens, the protest, the salutes to everyone who cared for us, everyone from our healthcare workers to our postal workers to our grocery workers who kept us all going. And then, of course, the horrific loss of lives and the loss of our freedoms. And really, everyone, the book will make you pause and it will take your breath away with the beauty and the sorrow. And for everyone who loves New York City, and I think that would be all of us, right? It's truly a love story to the city that we all love. And as Nicole says, it's the eternal flame of New York City that can never be extinguished. So, Nicole, before we talk about the book, I want to tell people a little more about you. So, Nicole is a native New Yorker. She was born and raised in New York City, and she still lives there with their husband. She raised her three daughters there. She studied studio art, art history, creative writing, and photography. And following a career in the art world, she launched her own boutique interior design firm. So, you truly are a Renaissance woman. So while, yeah, you are. So while this is your first published book of poems and photos, you've actually been writing poems and taking photos for a very long time. So tell us about that.
I certainly have, Cheryl. I've always written poetry. I've always loved photos, and I am a walker. So when I was 9 years old, somebody gave me the Shel Silverstein poetry anthology, Where the Sidewalk Ends. And it's probably the first book after Judy Blume that I read cover to cover. And as soon as I put it down, I spent the entire weekend composing a complete book of poems with silly, silly rhymes. And I was proud. I had known that I had done something that I'd never done before. Also, growing up, I spent lots of time when I was really little, especially going through my family photo albums, all those old spiral photo albums that my mother had taken the time to put together. And as far as walking, I gave up on the gym a few years ago, and I am a walker. I am an explorer. I like to walk for transportation. I like to walk for exercise. So for me, I walk most mornings, and it's a form of meditation that I could not live without.
Well, that's great, and you have so many wonderful photos that you've taken of street scenes in New York City before all this happened, and people can find these on your wonderful Instagram accounts too, and they should all follow you. So your very first poem in your book starts shortly after lockdown on March 25th. So how did you start writing this, and then how did the photos come into it?
So, the world was starting to close up in mid March. And I saw when California was locked down, I was grateful to see on television that they were allowed out for air and exercise. And then I saw that in poor Paris, they were only allowed to go out and exercise for a very limited number of hours in the morning. And when we got locked down, I was very, very relieved that I was still able to go outside and walk. So most mornings I got up, the shock reminded me what was going on, and I put on my gym clothing and I walked outside. The streets were completely vacant. There was no traffic on the roads. The park was empty. It was the beginning of spring. It was like nothing I've ever seen before and nothing I could have ever imagined or explained, although now we've all seen it. It was painful. I love New York City, as everybody knows. I talk about it a lot, but I love New York City like it's my fourth child. And I was really devastated. And I knew that I wasn't alone because the world over was experiencing everything that we were experiencing in some version or another. Then I do a lot of my writing, especially over the last 10 years or so, while I'm walking. I'm one of those lucky people that can multitask. I can listen to music and walk and write poetry or anything at the same time, which I realize is not normal. But over the years, writing has helped me through a lot of different minor and major things. Life is clearly a roller coaster that we're all on, and there are highs and there are lows, and I find it much easier to write from the lows. So I started writing. It was a coping mechanism. It enabled me to process what I was seeing, and it sort of gave me personal power over being, powerless from the pandemic. Then I'd come home and I'd wash my hands, and then I'd wash my hands again.
Right.
And then I'd sit down on the lap, at my desk and copy the poems and edit them onto a laptop. And the days that I did that, any day that I wrote, I had some satisfaction that I had accomplished something during the day. My children will tell you that I was a little obsessed with Corona, and I know they weren't so happy about that. So the photos that I always took, suddenly were focused on the Corona and what it, the virus and what it had done to the people and the city and our world. And I'm usually out and about taking street photography, which is my favorite. But since I was home so much more, I started taking a lot more photos of my kids and interiors and things that were new to me. So since we were locked down inside most of the time, that was my new canvas.
Right. And you suddenly too were seeing the city streets that you so love in such a very different way through this, which really comes through in your beautiful images. So I know that you started sharing your photos on social media, and as I said, especially on your Instagram account, but when did you actually realize that you might actually have a book by combining the poetry and the photos? What was that aha moment like?
So it's interesting because I overpost. I'm a hyper poster. Sorry, people. But when I started posting photos of what I was seeing during lockdown, I felt it was a good way to share with what was going on with the people who were no longer able to stay in New York City or people who couldn't go outside. It also helped me to see other people's posts, to be informed about what was going on everywhere else. What was I going? Oh, wrong page. Hold on. So I had this body of poems that was starting to form, and several poems after sort of 10 days or so, I realized, this might be a body of work worthy of a book. And then it dawned on me completely separately that, of course, I had all of these photos that could go along with it. They really developed completely separately. But because I was so focused on what was going on, they were obviously covering the same material the whole time. So I feel very lucky that I was able to find Cheryl and the Three Tomatoes Publishing, because I think we were a good fit, and I just am very happy to get this out in the world.
We're so happy you found us too, believe me. So the title of the book is so perfect, and let me tell you, anyone who's written a book, and I've written a couple of books, plus we work with a lot of authors, the toughest thing can be the title. So how did this title come to you?
Well, initially, the title was The Long Pause, because Governor Cuomo decided very carefully, I think, he chose his words carefully and chose the word pause instead of all the other horrible things so that we would not be too alarmed. So for months and months, through part of June, it was called The Long Pause. Then when George Floyd was murdered and my focus started to shift a little bit, it dawned on me that after writing about the aftermath of the murder and the energized momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement, that there was more to it. And in the shower, actually, it's where I come up with a lot of good work.
Yeah, I do too.
Title ended with,
My best thinking.
The long pause and the short breath.
Well, it's absolutely perfect. And your last poem was written on June 14th, just as the lockdown was ending. And I know people have asked you, why did you stop there with the poems, Nicole?
Part of me wishes I didn't, but at the time I really needed to stop because I was so focused on processing and relaying the negative parts of what was going on, and I really needed to move on with my life and try to create a more normal summer. And I had to turn it off. So I realized after the fact that I literally only wrote for the season of spring. It started on March 25th. It ended on June 14th. That is the bulk of the spring. And what I came up with was just a teeny tiny slice of life that hopefully we can collectively remember from this tiny bit. And if this happens again, as it has happened throughout history, and it will happen again, I just hope that it will not happen the same way it did, because we have recorded it and we will remember and react.
Oh, that's perfect. And now I know you're going to read us one of your poems. And while you're reading it, I'm going to put up a couple of the images from the books, because the images are I just fell in love with them, and everyone will too.
Okay. So I chose this as the first poem because it's the third poem in the book. It's March 30th, and it's the first one that I actually felt satisfied writing, and I felt like I got my feet wet. So, March 30th, 2020. Today, a field hospital is being erected in Central Park on the lawn where my children's nursery school had its annual year-end family picnics. These stiff white tarps draped over life-sustaining poles served as pillars of strength and should be carnival tents. Masks inside should be colorful superhero faces, a Wonder Woman, a Spider-Man, disguising real freckled and dimpled faces and missing teeth, yet to know who they will become. Instead, this makeshift medical unit opens tomorrow for COVID overflow. 68 beds to be filled by thousands via the ripple effect each person has. I can imagine the sound of the inevitable April showers as they rain down on the waterproof canvas. There is a refrigerated truck, a long one, stationed across the street from my house. It too is accessed from the rear entrance to the hospital by way of 2 white tents. My house is now a fort. Instead of cannons braced on my windowsill, I have gallons of hand soap, canisters of Clorox wipes, and 1,000-piece puzzles to defend my family's fate and passage of time. I do not tell my friends about the truck. There are many sentences that form in my head, but I leave them there not to upset anyone further. If they thought about it, they would know, but there is so much to think about and too much time to think. For now, my troops feel well, and I am grateful for each hour when this new normal is as good as this. I can still walk in my park, together 6 feet apart from my neighbors, past the hospital field where I once laid an old sheet and ate cold chicken nuggets dipped in ketchup with my 3-year-old.
Wow. That's hearing you read it is so special, Nicole, really. I'm just so happy about that. So now we have several special guests with us this evening, and I'm going to bring in the first one, who is David Gray, and he and Nicole have known each other since their college days, so I'm sure he has a tale or two he could tell or not. But anyway, David is a television writer, producer for several top TV shows that we all know, like Madam Secretary, Castle, The Gilmore Girls, Without a Trace, Joan of Arcadia, and so much more. He's also the co-founder of the Gotham Writers Workshop, and he's joining us live from Los Angeles today. So welcome, David, and also thank you for the really beautiful endorsement that you gave to Nicole for her book.
Thanks, Cheryl. It was my pleasure. And you know, the tale I want to tell is actually to correct the record a little bit about, not really correct, but enhance the record about what Nikki said about her. You know, she said she's someone who's always written poetry, as if like someone who just dabbled. Nikki, when we were in college, she was an incredibly serious poet. She'd already been writing poetry. She studied with Sharon Olds, and who is clearly probably an influence on her. So she's a serious writer, a practiced writer, and this isn't just a dabbling. In another life, this would be her, or in another dimension, I imagine, this is her 10th book of poetry or her 20th. So this is, you know, although it's her first book, she's an incredibly serious writer, and I've always considered her one of the best writers I know. Nikki is one of my best friends, very best friends in the world, and meeting her on my 18th birthday during orientation at Brandeis was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I'm especially mindful of how lucky I was back then, because my son had just started college a few months ago in such a different way. So I'm honored to share the screen with you, Nikki, and say a few words as you launch your beautiful book, Forever into the Ether of Our Culture and Humanity. And I just thought I'd offer a Toni Morrison quote that your book made me think of. This is a quote of Toni Morrison's from another challenging time. This is precisely when artists go to work. There is no time for no place for self-pity, need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. End of quote. Yeah. And with this book, Nikki Shore answered the call. So as Cheryl mentioned, I'm a TV writer. And as a TV writer, I know that good writing is about telling oh, go ahead. Oh, I thought I heard someone ask me. Okay. As a TV writer, I know that good writing is about telling details and authentic observations and mining truly genuine emotions, which is hard to get on page and ultimately the screen. But good poetry is about the most telling details and exacting, incisive, revelatory observations and eliciting searing, devastating, cut you to the core emotions. And that's what I experienced reading The Long Pause and The Short Breath. That's the incredible achievement of the book, in my opinion. But it's more than that. In television and film, the best directors always put the camera where the audience needs it, to see what's happening, but also to see the emotion of what's happening, to elicit emotion. And Nikki's camera is always pointed at the emotional center of the unfolding drama and tragedy, including, amazingly, the glimmers of hope and joy. And as a born and bred New Yorker from Staten Island, I've always idolized Manhattan, even back in the 70s and 80s. And then I lived in Manhattan during the 90s before heading to LA at the end of the millennium. So Nikki's book brought me back to the sights and sounds and smells of my beloved hometown. But the experience of reading it and taking in the photograph was more than that for me. Sometimes an artist just needs to get out of the way of her subject, to just let it speak for itself. And that's exactly what Nikki does with so many of these photographs. And even the verse, which is plain and simple, but devastatingly direct, much like pointing a camera lens. And that's what makes the combination of her photographs and poetry so powerful. They're virtually interchangeable. The poetry is almost like photography and vice versa. In fact, many of the photographs contain words. So there's literally poetry in the photos, found poetry, motivated by the pandemic and the social unrest and awakening. It's as if Nikki created a new art form. Call it poetography. And what an incredible poetographer you are, Nikki. I love this book because it put me inside the city I miss, and was worried about like nothing else in the last several months. I loved it because it could only have been written and shot by a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker who loves the city and mourned along with it and drew strength from her fellow New Yorkers. You feel the central character of the city in this book. You feel the character of the city. There's no bullshit genuineness. I've lived in bullshit central, otherwise known as Los Angeles, for the last 21 years. But this book, despite the sadness and agony it depicts, made me want to move back and reclaim my New York heritage and accent, which maybe I still have a little bit, but more than anything I've read in all the time I've been away. Nikki is an artist, and this book does what all great art does. It makes you see the world a little differently and illuminates something meaningful, and ultimately makes you feel a little better to be a human and alive, a little prouder of our shared humanity at a time when it often feels difficult. It also helps you make sense of the world, or at least make big, inconceivable things a little easier to digest. And that's the real gift of this book. And it's remarkable that you wrote it, Nikki, as it was happening, almost like a reporter. So maybe you're a rapport poetographer. Okay, maybe now I'm pushing it. But with another wave starting to hit New York, along with the rest of the country and the world, and on the precipice of the most divisive election in modern history, on top of the social justice issues that remain raw and are ongoing, we all hope for the best and look forward to more of your observations of our humanity in the midst of a national crisis to help us get through it together. To paraphrase you, if I may, smiling through our masks as we pass one another, saying good morning to strangers, even in the middle of New York City. So thank you, Nikki, for this beautiful book and for letting me share my thoughts today.
Thank you, David. I love your thoughts. Thank you.
That's great. And I love the new genre you created, this new genre, poetography. I think that's great. Thank you, David.
You bet.
So now we're going to be treated to another reading from Nicole's book, and I'm going to put up the image.
Okay, so this poem I chose because it was the first day that I had a truly meaningful Zoom where I felt like I actually connected to people and not just talking about, toilet paper and doom and gloom. It was just a very important moment in time. April 29th, 2020. Today, I am one of the stages of grief. Today, I am angry. I walk fast and hard early this morning in a drizzle, and I have a busy day on Zoom. At noon, I have my first virtual Shiva. I would like to do my hair for it. Peter's father died. He was loved, 88, and did not have COVID. He had one of the bad cancers. Peter knew he would die, and for years prepared himself, likely for a magical goodbye moment, a funeral on the Upper West Side filled with rows of support, and a eulogy about legacy. Peter is a writer. It would have been a doozy. Hundreds of people were expected to roll through his parents' Fifth Avenue Classic 8, well-lit, well-lived-in apartment for a full week. Instead, when Papa took the turn, Peter and his brother decided to drive out of isolation in Wyndham to Florida. They missed his last breath by about an hour. Peter had much less time to prepare himself for this extraordinary new breed of mourning. He sits in Miami with Mama for the week. His wife and children are locked down apart from their link to their beloved father-in-law and grandfather. I hope people are sending casseroles. Today at noon, my oldest friends and I will gather around Peter's screen and sit together to talk about Papa. We all need intimacy and rugelach. I am a bit nervous about dialing in, just as I might be before traversing the threshold of any Shiva house. These jitters are the most normal thing I have felt in the past 6 weeks. For that, I am grateful.
That was beautiful. And that was a scenario that so many people lived through at that particular time, sadly. And you just beautifully, again, captured those feelings. So now we're going to bring in another one of Nicole's wonderful friends and a special guest. We have Jennifer Ratner, who, like Nicole, is also a native New Yorker who still lives in New York City, the greatest city on earth, I must say. I think so anyway, and I know you two do. Jennifer is a pediatrician, and she's founder of Friends of the East River Esplanade, which is one of my favorite places in the city. It really is. It's so peaceful. She and Nicole have known each other since the birth of Nicole's first daughter, and they both share a love of poetry and their love of New York City. And also, Jennifer, I want to thank you for the beautiful endorsement too that you gave to Nicole.
Of course, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, honoring my poetographer friend. And we bonded over when we met in our New Moms group almost 25 years ago, because we are lifelong New Yorkers. And I think a lot of people out there might think lifelong New Yorkers, snobby, short, rude, but I think what bonds a lot of lifelong New Yorkers, especially those of us who grew up in the 1970s, is our optimism about this city and about the resiliency of this amazing city. And for me, much as other people have said today, I really think that's the thread that, in spite of the disaster of this crisis and the death and the sadness, if you flip through Nicole's book, it is full of optimism. It's beautiful. The photographs, as you've seen today, are beautiful and they're amazing. And they show that New York is there, the creativity is there, and the beauty in New York is everywhere. And so I'm just so grateful for that. And I think so many people are going to be really grateful for the beauty of this book that came through, and the resiliency that it shows. And the second thing I wanted to say is this was the first time in my life, other than when I went away to school, that I'd been away from New York City for so long. I was one of the people who deserted New York. I felt disconnected from New York City. And really the only thing that connected me to New York City and to feeling a part of it were Nicole's Facebook and Instagram posts throughout it. I felt they were just so genuine, so authentic, and beautiful, and showed me that, in spite of what I was reading in the press and seeing on TV, that there was optimism and hope and resiliency. And we all know New York City is going to come back, and I'm just waiting for your sequel. So thank you, and thanks for letting me honor you today, and congratulations. You really deserve it.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for being so honest too about your emotions as a New Yorker who left the city and then was kind of feeling guilty about it and looking at everything. There's so many people who felt that way, but also everyone's optimism that we know our great city is going to come back. So thank you for being so honest with us about that and sharing that too. So Nicole, you've got another poem for us. And I am going to bring up the image for that one. This is May 1st, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this photo of the doorman captured an image of a changed city. Doormen were usually inside buildings. Your whole life you only see a doorman if you go inside. And suddenly everywhere I went, they were all outside. They were wearing masks. And they were and still are and always have been essential workers. So this was May 1st, 2020. April just evaporated, and now it's May 1st. Mayday, Mayday, I cry for help, as does everyone else around the world, drowning each other out. A big business trip for me is canceled. I was willing to take an 8-seater prop plane, which was not optimal when booked, but now would be ideal. I felt like a daredevil when I agreed to take the tiny flight. Today, my adrenaline rushes each time I risk my life and go to the grocery or reclaim my favorite walking path, which is too narrow for social distance. I conquer these little battles daily. Or maybe I don't. Perhaps in 2 weeks, I will get sick from exercising or buying a lemon. My work as an interior designer is evaporating too. I spent 2 decades making people's homes beautiful enough to reflect their souls and their goals and be the perfect landing pad for the precious little time they had at home. Little did I know I was setting up bomb shelters for when a global pandemic blew lethal particles of destruction into our air clouds and onto our Amazon packages. With a decomposing economy, Who will want to replace their carpet because they are finally tired of the color gray? Who will want to demolish walls while we build the world back up? We stay home. The middle spot on my velvet sofa bends and gives a bit more every day, adjusting to its extended burden. I have chipped most of my everyday plates and bowls. I am wearing out my house and tearing through my sweats while my tailored wardrobe goes out of style, just hanging there in my dark, dusty closet. I cannot imagine how it will feel to wear a shoe all day, but when I can, I will put on my most crisp jeans, ones without trendy holes manufactured into the knees, and a plain white tee, and venture out with my longer, grayer hair into the new world, forever changed by air. You're on mute.
That I know, that was great. That was really terrific, Nicole. Thank you again. So now we have another one of Nicole's college friends joining us, and this one's really interesting. This is Paula Fein, and she and Nicole were randomly assigned as roommates in their freshman year. And we know how that usually goes, but in their case, they ended up being roommates for the entire 4 years, and they are still wonderful, close friends. Paula and her husband live in Philadelphia, and Paula is joining us from there tonight, where they own a small business research and education company for the pharmaceutical industry. So thank you so much, Paula, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I'm so happy to be able to share this really special, amazing moment with you, Nikki. It's just been really special, and thank you for including me. So yes, I'm honored to have known Nicole for more than 3 decades. I still remember the day that I met her in our freshman dorm room. I remember all the nights we slept in the same room. I don't recall us having matching bunny slippers like the ones we just saw, the ones in her book, but metaphorically, I believe we had them. I do remember Nicole's passion for the aesthetic, even when it came to the 7 by 9 foot trashy carpet on the floor between our beds, or the green and pink cereal bowls that lived on our desks. Maybe those are bunny slippers. There are many things that I admire and love about Nicole. There is one thing she so beautifully and skillfully demonstrates in this book of poems and photographs: her ability to capture and convey a moment. At a basic level, the moments she captures in this book are a set of circumstances that she shares with her audience using words and accompanying images. The moments are often mundane, seemingly unremarkable scenes of life. In this context, during lockdown in New York City, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and during the days and weeks following George Floyd's murder. But what makes Nicole's work so poignant, so gut-wrenching, so dire, or so hopeful is her unique, consistent, penetrating poetic voice. This voice tells us why the seemingly mundane scene is not mundane, or why the seemingly unremarkable scene is in fact remarkable. The most exceptional aspect of Nicole's poetic voice, which is evident in both her poetry and her photographs, is that she schools her readers on what is important and why it's important without leaving us feeling schooled. She gives us the answer, but she also gives us the opportunity to do the math, to see and understand the importance, to come to her intended conclusion ourselves. As a reader of poetry, there is nothing more rewarding. I would argue that Nicole's poetic voice is also evident in her interior design work, but that will be a topic of my speech for her second book launch, the book that is her poems accompanied by photographs of her interiors. Cheryl, you need to get on that. For me personally, I'm fortunate enough to hear Nicole's poetic voice every time we communicate. Her penetrating poetic voice is sometimes delivered to me in the form of a single emoji response to my 50 words of ranting text. I'm also fortunate enough to have witnessed Nicole's poetry evolve and mature over the years that I have known her. But that evolution is only in her message, in her deepening understanding of what is happening in the world around her, around us. Her brilliant signature poetic voice, that voice that schools us without leaving us feeling schooled, hasn't changed a bit. Finally, I'd like to thank Nicole for this book. In spare verse and stark images, you captured a moment. Decades from now, our children and our grandchildren, all their children, will have the opportunity to know and truly understand the long pause and the short breath. Thank you.
That was absolutely perfect, Paula. You really captured the book so beautifully. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So now, Nicole, you have another poem, and this one I believe is May 12th, and it actually has two of my favorite photos, although I have to say it's very hard to pick the favorites because they're all terrific, but you'll all see what I mean in just a moment.
Okay, so this is actually a fairly, to me, very interesting story. On May 12th, I went out and walked on Fifth Avenue, and across from Mount Sinai Hospital, I saw this sculpture on the left sitting there. And my reaction when I saw it was that it had come full circle from the first poem that I read to you about how the field hospital in Central Park should have tents with masked children in Spider-Man costumes. So when I saw it, it was almost like a direct message. It was shocking to me, and it was simultaneous to while they were taking down the no longer necessary field hospital in the park. After I wrote the poem, I reached out to the artist of this sculpture on Instagram, and I sent him the two poems. And then I subsequently learned that the Department of Sanitation had picked up the sculpture and thrown it out. Lucky for him, a bystander witnessed it, alerted him, and he was able to track the sculpture down. He then donated it to the New York Historical Society, where it will remain in their archives. May 12th, 2020. This morning, I was brave enough to walk directly by the field hospital in Central Park. I have been staying away from Mount Sinai Hospital, which is odd since I cannot avoid Lenox Hill Hospital right outside my window. The last white tent was coming down. It looks like I imagine Coachella looks when it's packing up. Con Ed was there disconnecting, and Samaritan's Purse trucks and Jesus Christ lined Fifth Avenue collecting the contaminated parts. I saw a small but life-size plaster of Paris sculpture of a boy in a Spider-Man eye mask and a yellow cape. His hard, hollow body is seated on a splintery park bench right outside the field. He wears powerful red boots painted on his little legs, and of course a real surgical mask and matching gloves, with which he holds a sign that says, "Thank you." It is clearly written in rainbow markers by someone who has not been writing for too long. The placard alongside says this project was a father-son collaboration, and beautiful, boneless figurines like this are being placed outside of hospitals and essential businesses to say thank you. I can picture the look-alike pair in their kitchen, surrounded by heaps of cloth and wire to be cut and glued into pasty flesh and skeletal structures. There was probably red paint that dripped onto their tile and permanently stained their grout. This little handmade boy, propped up on an old bench, screams love and appreciation louder than all the respirators that were in the park and all the traffic that once raced and will soon flow again down Fifth Avenue.
Awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much. So now it gives me really great pleasure because I get to introduce Nicole's incredibly wonderful and supportive family. And like many families, they were all together during lockdown. So now, and I'm sure they have stories to tell about that, as you all do. So now I'm going to bring in Nicole's husband, Doug. And let's bring in her daughter, Lexi. And then we will bring in Julia and Valerie, who I popped in briefly before. So welcome, everyone.
Hi, fam.
Hi, Mom. Okay, so we thought it would be fitting to write a poem to show you that we actually enjoyed quarantine a little bit and how proud we are of this book and how much we love you. Julia. When we thought about the best way to show how proud we are, we decided on a poem for our mom, a superstar. It has been a wild ride through our family quarantine. No one flourished more than you in the face of COVID-19. The queen of puzzles and cleaning and making the best of the worst, and always reminding us to eat the old fruit first. While some of us spent quarantine sleeping well past noon, you took on the role of activity planner, bringing fun to every room. Between living room happy hours and family movie nights, you somehow found the time each day to sit, reflect, and write. We can't say we're surprised that you published your own book. What amazes us more is the humble route you took. If anyone knows our mother, you know she's never one to boast, so we will do it for her in our virtual toast. Only someone with a creative eye so detailed and so rare could turn a global pandemic into a published artistic affair. She captured daily moments that felt so small as they went by and turned them into a beautiful story told through Instagram and rhyme. While quarantining as a family was not something we had planned, you brought positivity and excitement under the management's command. We somehow missed the daily clap for workers on the street and making fun of you for arriving early so as to never miss a beat. Although you embarrassed us by whistling and banging pots and pans to cheer, we all appreciate your ability to choose hope instead of fear. This is our thank you for leading our family through this slow and invisible war, for being our bravest soldier and venturing out to the grocery store. You turned an unexpected roadblock into an indoor family staycation and documented the entire thing in the form of a published creation. Though we will rarely admit it, the queue had some silver lining, one last chance to play house as a family combining. The 5 of us back together was a gift we won't forget. We are also lucky to have you as a mom, a wife, a poet.
Oh,
There's more. You didn't pass your poetic genes to me, I won't lie, but in honor of you writing a book, I'll give it a try. So let me start this off by warning that my poem might be bad. They don't compare to the ones in your book, which are really rad. It all started at the beginning of COVID when you started to cook, but soon you put that down and started writing this book. You captured New York City so perfectly from March through June. When describing both the good and the bad, your words are so attuned. Most people here were unaware of your talent, as you have never shown it, but you're such a good poet and we didn't even know it. Your images and poems have made people both laugh and cry. I personally couldn't put the book down, and that's not a lie. You have quite a way with words, and I think everyone here agrees. I specifically love the poem about the Mr. Softee truck, and not just because it mentions me. Your poems are so passionate, genuine, and from the heart. You've somehow turned the mess of the pandemic into a beautiful work of art. When I'm older and my kids ask me about what New York City was like during COVID-19, I don't think I'll be able to accurately describe what I've seen. However, thankfully, I'll be able to just whip out your book and they'll have a picture painted for them perfectly with one book. Congrats on putting your artistic talent out into the world for everyone to read. You followed your desire to turn words on your iPhone into a comprehensive read. A comprehensive book indeed, sorry. Now I'll end my part by saying that your poems are great. You're such a talented poet and I wish I could relate.
When you first started writing your poems, who knew they would turn into a book? You inspire us each and every day with your talent, care, and of course, love. You're always there for us, whether it's a shoulder to lean on, a source of entertainment, or carrying around Altoids and lip balm. What would we do without our matriarch, best friend, and of course, our mom? You're extremely talented with your poetry, photography, and interior design. And as busy as you are, you always make time for the things that you love, your friends, family, sushi, and of course, wine. The best compliment I can get is you and your mom are twins. But if I'm half as successful, talented, and passionate as you are when I'm your age, then I can say I win. You have taught us the meaning of family and that we are a team, to see the glass half full rather than half empty, and that every bad day can be cured with ice cream. You have showed us how to be a good friend, to be patient, not to push or shove, to stand up for what we believe in, do what makes us happy, and how to love. Although it's kind of embarrassing to admit that my mom has more Instagram followers than me, you have an eye for art, your creativity and photos bless our feeds, and I think everyone would agree. When I'm having a bad day, you're always the first person to call. You can instantly make me feel better, and this is true since the days we played with dolls. You radiate positivity and can always bring out a smile, whether you're exploring a new neighborhood, a furniture store, a museum, or walking the reservoir for miles. There are 2 silver linings of COVID, all 5 of us living under the same roof again, and finding time to do what you love. The long pause and short breath is our proof. for being such a talented and inspiring mom and always doing the most. It's finally time for us all to celebrate being published. So I'll pass it to my dad to make a toast.
Okay. Very tough acts to follow, everyone. Other than my children, I know Nicole the fewest number of years of any of the people who spoke. So, but no, I'm gonna say something and then I need to get up and I'll do the toast. So I'm just incredibly proud and overjoyed for Nikki. I had no idea that she was doing this throughout lockdown. It was a very dark and uncertain time in the world, especially here in New York, which at the time was the epicenter of the pandemic. One can really feel in her words and see in her photographs her passion, frustration, hope, and emotions during this time. It really was incredible storytelling and photography. I knew she basically had a master's in poetry, but had no idea how talented she really was. Unfortunately, life sometimes gets in the way of one's real talent, and hopefully she will continue to do this combo of poems and photography going forward. The beauty of this book is that it wasn't written after the fact when one's perspective might have changed. It was a real-time story of her emotions, thoughts, and worries captured via words and photographs. People have said this before, but I think it really will be a treasured keepsake and reminder for us and for future generations of our family of what happened almost daily during this time in our history. As we've heard all these native New Yorkers speak of their love for New York, but this really is Nikki's love letter to her beloved city of New York, warts and all. It really is just incredible, and I'm so proud and happy for her, and I hope she continues to do this. So I actually have to get up for a minute because this is part of the toast, so just bear with me.
Okay, so while Doug is doing that, first of all, I'm so excited because I think I have a whole new generation of poets that I can publish. So great job, young Rubin ladies. I think this is terrific. And I'm also going to bring everybody who's been celebrating with us back in on the screen so we can all have a wonderful toast as soon as Doug gets back. So, Lexi and Julia and Valerie, you just did an amazing job. That was
wow. Look what I got. Can everyone see that?
No.
Okay, so everyone. Okay, so everyone who knows Nikki well knows of her love of ice cream, both to eat it and to photograph it. I can't count the number of times, so many different places we've eaten ice cream, and it always gets photographed. But I thought instead of a traditional champagne toast, it would be more appropriate to toast her with one of her favorite ice creams. I ended up getting 5 pints of Jenny's ice cream, representing a family unit of 5 and also the 5 boroughs of her beloved city. So I thought that this would be an appropriate way to toast her. So if everyone raises their glass or their ice cream cone or whatever they're raising, here's a toast to the long pause and the short breath. And let's hope it's a short pause and a long breath before the next one. So congratulations. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, too, and everyone who spoke.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Coffee with milk and sugar ice cream.
Oh, I'm so jealous that I don't have the ice cream. I only have the wine.
So sorry.
Well, I want to thank you all. And Nicole has one more poem that she's going to share with us, but you have all been so wonderful to honor Nicole in this way. And it was very touching for me to watch this, and I know for everyone else too. Nicole, do you want to say a couple of things before we go to your last poem?
I especially want to thank all of my people on the screen. Each and every interaction that I've had throughout my life contributes to everything I see and write. I believe that. And I thank you all for your friendship and your support. And to those that I cannot see, all of that applies to you as well. And I'm really grateful that you could all come. And I thank you for buying the book and for being such enthusiastic friends and supporters. So thank you.
Beautifully said. And Nicole, you have a lot of people who are here behind the scenes tonight watching this live. So that is really terrific. So we're going to send everyone back into our little green room for a moment. And we're going to have you read your last poem, the last poem you were going to read for tonight, which is really very poignant, which is May 30th.
Okay. So this poem was written 5 days after the murder of George Floyd, and the world felt completely different. May 30th, 2020. This is the verse I did not want to write. This is the plot twist I did not see coming now, but it has been coming for centuries. George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis at the white knee of some brutal police. There is no way to make sense of the video we were all still home to watch over and over on repeat on our scratched and cracked screens. This is the news story that finally outran Corona. This is the novel, festering nightmare. The nation is setting itself on futile fire in protest. As we actually approach reopening, and Cuomo has deemed it New York forward, I had started to think about my last entry to this chronicle. I planned to end it with the positivity of all that was created out of the world that was locked down, together apart, bound by hateful air that would rest and bring permanent renewal. The world was to be a different place after, much of the change for my children's future good, but it is no different than before. The long rest culminates in unrest and 40 million jobless Americans. We have taken 2 steps backwards. America is spiraling from grace. Black and brown beaten down by Corona is the same story as the crushing, strangling, infinite shots fired, knee on the neck attack that is another plague for which only the few seek a vaccine. For the first time in 11 weeks, I feel sick.
Nicole, that was a great poem to end on. And I just want to personally give you a little toast. Mine is with wine. It's not the ice cream. I'm a little jealous about the ice cream now. But you have really, your book is so extraordinary. And you have really created something that is a legacy that will live on, because future generations who want to understand what happened will be able to read what you wrote. And we're just so grateful that you shared it with all of us. And I just want to say to everyone who's listening, and there's a lot of people on here live tonight, please buy Nicole's book. And I think after you've heard it, you're going to do that. Also, please tell your friends about the book. And the holidays are coming up, and it's really an extraordinary gift to give to anyone, I think, this holiday season, because we really don't need things, but to be able to be gifted a book like this would really be a true gift. So again, Nicole, congratulations. We're all so proud of you, and I'm so happy to have gotten to know you through this process of publishing your book. You're a very, very special person.
I thank you, Cheryl. I couldn't have done any of this without you. I'm very happy that we were connected, and really grateful for your guidance. And
I am too. So on that note, we're going to leave with the little video of the book and another little reminder to buy the book.